We continue our gospel lesson in the same chapter, 9 of the Gospel of John, picking up at verse 35. When Jesus heard of the expulsion, he sought out the healed one and asked, "Do you believe in the chosen one?" The other answered, "Who is this one, that I may believe?" "You are looking at him," Jesus replied. "The chosen one is speaking to you now." The healed one said, "Yes, I believe," and worshipped Jesus. And Jesus said, "I came into the world to execute justice, to make the sightless see and the seeing blind." Some of the Pharisees who were nearby heard this and said, "You're not calling us blind, are you?" To which Jesus replied, "If you were blind, there would be no sin in that. But since you say we see, your sin remains." The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. We continue our sermon series recovering from religious trauma this morning. You may recall last week from Indira Udofia's great sermon as she spoke about the biases that we encounter in church and even, yes, the bias that Jesus faced and overcame when he healed the Canaanite woman. Here we continue in this rather lengthy narrative of Jesus and this one born blind, religious leaders, parents, and community. On display in this chapter of John is what I would like to term a good old-fashioned church fight, a squabble, a heated debate, something that divides a church real fast. How many people have been harmed by church fights, I wonder? Sometimes the argument is about the color of the proposed carpet, or the new paint, or the addition of a guitar to the worship service. Look out. These are fighting words. And sometimes deeper things, deeper realities about the inclusion of people who have historically not been included. In our church passage today, at the center of this church fight is a person, a man. We're not sure how old he is or where he came from. We don't even get a name for this man, for this one. All we know is that he was born with a disability. He was born blind. And as with so many disabilities, this man has been known only by his disability. And yes, at the heart of this story is sight, is seeing, but not in the way that we would think. You see, Jesus leads us into a world where the blind see and those who see become blind as he ends this narrative. Even though this man, this person, this beloved of God, this flesh and blood person before them was right before the disciples in their presence, knew of the parents, the religious leaders, and the community, none could actually see him, though he was right in front of their very eyes. First, friends, as you journey through this lengthy passage, first you see this man is a theological problem, a conundrum to be solved. The disciples, the good old disciples, they've been following Jesus for a while now. They are picking up steam. They're growing in faith. They know what Jesus is about, and they see this man. And what do they say to Jesus? Who sinned? Was it this man or his parents? They do not see the man before them, but a theological question, something to be solved, a riddle to be figured out. Someone must have been sinning, Jesus. Who was it? The man is not a man, but a pretext for argument. And the disciples, no matter how closely they have been following Jesus, in this moment cannot see the very person before them. Next, after this man has been healed, the village, the man's very community, his neighbors, cannot see the man before them. What do they see? Isn't this the man who's been begging for money? Isn't this the beggar? They cannot see the man before them who can see. They can't see that man. It can't be that man. The good townfolk can't even comprehend that this could be that same person. They do not recognize him. Without him there to panhandle, who are they? Who will remind them of how lucky they are every time they pass him? This must be someone else. They could only see him as the beggar, not the man healed, with autonomy and freedom to act. The community, as accustomed to seeing this man on the street corner, cannot really see that he is there before them. Things are heating up, friends. They bring this man to the religious leader. Surely they will know. They are the trusted leaders in our community. They have spiritual things in hand. They are the ones that we can entrust ourselves to. They have the good, our good, in mind. We can trust them. But see, the Pharisees, these religious leaders, they cannot see the man before them. What do they see? But a religious problem. He broke the traditions. You've been healed. When was it? Oh, on the Sabbath. Oh, we have a problem. No one can be healed on the Sabbath. That's breaking the law. That's breaking our custom. That is breaking our traditions. This is against our religious code of conduct. Surely a healing of any sort is against the Sabbath when it happens on the Sabbath. So this cannot be true. This healing is fake news, surely made up by the disciples. And so these religious leaders in this moment, what do? Do they embrace? No, they send for the parents. Surely the parents here, before their community, will own up to this one. The parents, the man's own parents, cannot see the man. What do they see? They only see a cause of fear and not a person to celebrate. They duck, they dodge, and they dive the religious leaders and their questions. They don't want to be put out of the synagogue. They don't want to be excluded from church. Maybe they teach Sunday school, or maybe they sit on the trustees, or maybe they are a greeter at church, and they cannot entertain the idea of losing that identity. They live in fear. They do not want to be known within the religious community for having a son who was healed like that on the Sabbath by Jesus, of all people. They do not want to face the shame. Now, shame is social, friends, and is socially constructed. So what the parents face is not of God here, but of this particular religious community. They cannot face it. They do not want to face the fear of being kicked out. So they punt. Ask our son. He'll tell you. The religious leaders cannot let this go. They will not see this man as one who's been healed. They still see him as one not worthy of being a part of their community. So they bring this man back to ask him, to interrogate him. Maybe this time he will tell the truth. Tell them what's really going on here. Certainly they are punking him. And all he can say, this man is this. This is, I once was blind, but now I see. Much of the church hurt I encounter as a pastor is because of this very thing. Churches fighting over something new that God has done in their very midst. And they cannot or will not comprehend it. And the arguments are theological, they are philosophical, and they are about religious practice, and all of these arguments are only obscuring the very person that is before them in the community which they live. And in the midst of the fighting, in the bickering, and the arguing are people. Is this man? They are blind to the truth of the man before him. They have come to believe a lie. For it is easier, friends, to believe a lie than to reckon with the truth of Jesus. It is easier to believe in a lie than to reckon with the truth of Jesus. And this is the nature of sin, settling for lies rather than living with the truth. So often for us in the religious community, friends, it is easier to draw strong boundaries with firm walls that separate us one from the other, to define who we are and to comprehend what God can and cannot do, who is in and who is out, than it is to follow Jesus and to love our neighbors. This person, this beloved of God, was born blind, but now can see, is ostracized for what God has done in his life. He does not fit into the boxes anymore. He is a cause of fear for some, for his parents in particular, and he is now becoming a stranger to his community. And this story, I am sad to say, is not unique to this one, but continues on today. This is church hurt that's deep. This man is like the one called by God to preach, but excluded by the church because of their gender or sexuality. This one is like the one transformed and reckoned with truth, with the Spirit of God with them, but denied access to the holy because of who they are. This one, this beloved, is like the one who has an epiphany from God about God's overwhelming, inclusive love for all people, and is shunned for believing so from their community. One of the ways we feel church hurt is by the rejection from our community that has cared for us and watched over for us, especially our spiritual well-being. And when the very community you love and loves you now shows you the door, the hurt runs deep. I get that. But I want you to notice something. If this applies to you, I want you to notice something from this passage, that the man who's born blind walks away with sight, physical sight and spiritual sight, transformed. Hear this, what God has done in your life, what God has done in your life cannot be undone by a toxic community. What God has done in your life cannot be undone by your parents, by your pastor, by your church. The rejection you have felt has no bearing upon God's acceptance for you. It cannot undo what God has done for you. The collective voices of parents and pastors and neighbors is not the God's voice who calls to you, that seeks you out. Finally, these leaders These leaders have given up, and they have driven this man out. They cannot reckon with him. He will not fit into their categories, and so they have shown him the door. And the entire community that he walks away from is engulfed in darkness, no longer able to see the truth that's before them. Now he walks into a new world of sight, a world apart from that community. And in that moment, Jesus seeks him out. Like a shepherd to a sheep. Jesus, light of the world, brought sight to his life and now seeks him out, outside of the religious community, outside of his family. Jesus seeks him out and finds him. Why? Look at verse 1. Because Jesus first saw the man. No one through the narrative has seen him but Jesus. And Jesus sees him still and seeks him out. Jesus sees the man, Jesus heals the man and seeks him out. And now this one, this beloved of God, is linked to the life of Jesus, now and forevermore. And people couldn't understand Jesus. They couldn't understand Jesus. The parents were fearful of this claim about Jesus, this man who heals on a Sabbath. The religious leaders are confounded by Jesus. But the man, this one, this beloved of God, eventually saw Jesus. As his eyes are slowly opening through this passage, he sees first Jesus the man, and then the prophet, and then at the very end here as one worthy of worship. He saw Jesus because Jesus first saw him. So no matter how far you feel you are from God, God is always closer than you think. No matter how alone you may feel, God is there nearer to you than you know, seeking you out. Because the one has done a good work in you. Is not some man, it's not some prophet, but the very Son of God whom we worship, and he sees you, and he heals you, and he seeks you out. Thanks be to God. Let us stand to sing the summons found